What's going on, everyone? Phil here, and I'm doing something that originally I was not planning on doing, but because so many people over on my DSP gaming channel have been asking me about my thoughts on the Last of Us television show ever since it released over a month ago, and now finally I caved and got HBO Max because people asked me so much, I'm now going to give you my thoughts about this show. Now, so far, I've seen one episode, the pilot episode, which is an hour and 20 minutes long, and it sets the stage for essentially what's going to be the rest of the series. So what I'd like to do is give you my thoughts on that, being as someone who played The Last of Us 1 originally when it came out, played it a year later on PS4, and then recently last year watched someone play The Last of Us Part 1 on PS5. The Last of Us was my Game of the Year pick the year that it was released. That's how well of a game I thought it was written. I thought the writing was so superb, amazing graphics, a groundbreaking game. Felt to me like that was the best interactive story I've ever played in my life. And to this day, I still think it's one of the best gaming stories I've ever experienced. Even all this time later, a decade later or so, okay? All that being said, The Last of Us TV series is a lot different. And it's weird because a lot of people had said to me they felt that this was like the closest adaptation of a video game to a show that was very true to the source material and it was really trying to respect it. I mean, I kind of get that. At the same time, the show has a lot of differences from the source material. And at first, when I was watching this episode, again, it's an hour and 20 minutes long, and the amount of ground that's covered in that hour and 20 minutes, when if you were playing the game, it would probably be 3-4 hours, okay? It's fast moving. But the weird part about that is they linger on parts and kind of extend parts that don't really make much sense. So to give you some perspective here, in the original game, the whole setup of Joel and his daughter having some interactions, then all of a sudden the cordyceps virus breaks out, starts infecting everyone around, and Joel comes home and grabs his daughter, tosses her in a car. They're driving with the brother, Tommy, and they're trying to escape town, and then they go into town, and everything's going to hell, and everything goes wrong, right? Without spoiling or whatever. Basically, that segment is incredibly fast-moving and action-packed. It's good at building drama, but everything is just going to hell in a handbasket so fast. In the show, they spend at least an extra 10 minutes building up everyone's normal life. In fact, there's characters added, like a next door neighbor who's an elderly woman, who then ends up becoming the first person overcame with the cordyceps, fungus. It's weird that they built it up that much. I'm not actually even sure it added that much to it to do that. In addition, there's some weird distinct changes. For example, Joel doesn't have an accent anymore. In the game, he has kind of a southern drawl accent. He doesn't have that in the show. I don't know what the purpose of removing that was, but they removed it. His daughter is of mixed race now. And you might say, oh, it's a big deal. I don't think it is a big deal. I don't think it matters at all. Who cares what race his daughter is or the characters are? The distinct thing, though, is that it's a change they made that doesn't really add anything or change anything. The plot's still the same. The characters are pretty close to the representations in the game. So why make that change? It doesn't seem to serve much of a purpose at all, okay? This is a running theme that I'm going to reference later. So, once they go through this, relatively slow build, and then all hell breaks loose, all right? I like the build scene where they're driving in the car and they're going downtown and everything's going crazy. I like that it's very close to the game. What I didn't like is they changed the time frame when the show takes place. That apparently the outbreak happened in 2003, so it's the George W. Bush era. They even reference, oh no, is it terrorists? Because 9/11 happened just a couple years before this. And the weird thing about it too are the planes crashing. In the original game, basically what happened was this cordyceps virus kind of spread slowly throughout the world and took over different regions. Here, apparently, if you're to believe what the show is telling you, it's worldwide, all happened at once. How on earth were people who were down on the ground level of Earth affected in exactly the same time as people who were flying in airplanes, so all the airplanes crashed out of the air simultaneously? It doesn't even make sense. Like, what? Was there a giant fart cloud of fungus that just engulfed the Earth's ozone layer and then zoop, and it hit everyone at once and everyone got infected? It just doesn't really make sense at all. I understand they were going for these real epic scenes of dramatic effect with the planes crashing or whatever at the same time that everyone's being overtaken and infected, but it's confusing. In addition, the cordyceps zombies are different in the show. They're violent and eating you. Now, not to say that they don't bite you in the game, but I would say the real risk in the game is violence, right? The infected are trying to bludgeon you, murder you, rip you apart, yeah, bite you, but here it's like they're cannibals. It's kind of like they're traditional cannibal zombies. And that was kind of weird to me because I don't remember seeing a lot of that in the game. I do remember a lot of people dying, but I don't remember seeing people just being eaten alive like a traditional cannibal zombie. So it's another change that's interesting, but doesn't necessarily change much, okay? Then when they actually get into the meat of the show itself, okay? I will say this, I think Pedro Pascal does a great job as Joel for the way he was directed or whatever. He's doing a good job. The character's good. I actually like Anna Torv as Tess, although completely different look for sure than she was in the game. Then again, they already changed Tess's look for Last of Us Part 1. To see her changed again for the show is not shocking. Again, though, weird changes. Okay, so now it takes place in present day, 20 years later after the infection in 2003. So everyone's ages is like thrown off and different, correct? And the fact that they changed the order of events, like in the game, basically Tess is trying to find this guy because this guy scammed her and was supposed to give her a car battery and he stole it. So she has to track him down. She of course, Tess and Joel have to get through a bunch of enemies, which is gameplay that's not going to be in the show. They track the guy down, and when they finally do, Tess gets the battery back and brutally murders him. And it just shows the harsh realities of this world that there is no forgiveness. If you fuck with people, you're going to die in this post-apocalyptic world of the cordyceps zombies, right? In the show, they change everything. So now Tess is captured by the guy, and then there's a weird explosion that's random. She gets free. She ends up in a lockup, even though she didn't do anything wrong. Then she gets to Joel, and Joel and her decide that they're going to go after the guy. By the time they find the guy, he's already dead because they got into a shootout with the Fireflies. It's just like, why change that? It worked in the game. Maybe they didn't want Tess to look like a cold-blooded killer, but it was working in the game, and I don't understand. It kind of almost makes it feel like maybe they didn't want Tess to look as that harsh of a character, and you wanted to maybe like her a little more. I don't know. I just didn't like that. I didn't like that they changed the order of events and made it completely different from how... I think it was harsh and gritty and dark in the game, and that's how you want it in the Last of Us plotline. It's almost like they're trying to tone it down a bit. Also, oh my god, the character of Ellie. Now we got to get to this. Actress is great. Don't mind her at all as Ellie. What I mind is the change of the plot. In the original game, Ellie was basically mentored by the leader of the Fireflies, Marlene. She was taught to be a survivalist. So that's why she speaks like an adult, because she basically acts like an adult and hangs out with adults to become a survivalist, because she is the person immune to the sickness. So that's why she's good with a knife. That's why when they're later on in parts of the game and they're seeing ridiculous references to how kids were before this crazy cordyceps thing happened, she's literally reading a diary in the game of a teenage girl. And she says to Joel, is this how kids used to be? And because she's super, does she joke a bit? Of course she does. But she's a serious person. She's about survival. She's not some dumb kid doing dumb things. She's not grown up in an environment that allowed her to be like that. She can't be frivolous. She can't be silly, because it's life or death every moment, right? That's the character of Ellie, and that's actually one of the things that make her stand out as a unique and interesting character that grows over the course of the Last of Us plot. In this show, she's locked up. Instead of being mentored by Marlene and trained to be a survivalist, she's chained up and locked up. Doesn't know why. Marlene introduces herself instantly. Somehow, I guess they're supposed to become friends. It makes no sense whatsoever. And then, the same thing kind of happens where Marlene gets hurt, and now it's up to Joel and Tess to take on Ellie and get her to a safe spot, although they don't know why they're doing it, but they just told it's super important, okay? But the thing that got me is the distinct personality change in Ellie. The first moment that they get outside of the walls of the city, Ellie, out in the open, where there's big booming floodlights and there's people all over looking for people who are infected, that if they find you, they're going to grab you, lock you down, likely execute you if they think you're infected. She stands up in the middle and says, wow, I'm finally outside the walls. This is amazing. Fuck yeah. I never thought this happened. What are you, a fucking jackass? They went from smart survivalist adult like Ellie from the game to a complete dunce of a character on the television show, at least at this point in the plot. I'm like watching it and I'm like, this is stupid. She's overcome with emotion. She stabs a patrolman who they come up and against, pretty much for no reason, because there was no way she was going to overpower the guy. So obviously puts them in risk for stabbing the guy. This doesn't make sense to me. Like, Ellie was smart in the games and she's dumb in the show, okay? And of course, you know, the ending of that first episode is basically they're heading into the city, outside of the wall. We don't know what's going to happen. They're trying to get Ellie to a safe spot, and that's it. That's where it ends, okay? So what I would say is things I liked. Cinematography is great, all right? Acting is quite good, all right? And there's a real emotional moments, you know, when Joel's daughter, when that plot line ends, that's really emotional. But at the same time, there's a significant amount of changes that leave you scratching your head, saying, why did they change so much? I like the plot of The Last of Us game. Why change it so much for the television show? Well, here's the thing. A lot of people defend it and say, well, it's because it's a show. You don't want to just see the exact same plot copy-pasted from the game to the show. You want it to stand alone as its own thing. Fair enough, but if you're going to tell me that there's changes made, then the changes should be significant enough that they have meaning. The changes that have happened from the game to the show, in my opinion, have no meaning. I don't care if the zombies now want to eat you first. Not a big deal. I don't care if Joel has a mixed race daughter. I don't care if he lost his accent, right? Oh, now the cordyceps virus happened in 2003 and now it's 20 years later. Everyone's age slightly changed. You know, there's all these little like nuanced changes around. And you might say to yourself, I wonder why. Well, I know why, okay? Here's why this all happened. You may not be aware, but the original people involved with the making of the original Last of Us, a lot of them don't work for Naughty Dog anymore. There was a big falling out in the last 10 to 15 years, especially during the development of the Uncharted games, especially Uncharted 4. That's really where the big fallout happened, and a lot of people left the studio, and other people had to pick up the reins to finish the game. I personally liked it, but a lot of people feel that Uncharted 4 should have been a completely different game from what it was, if only there wasn't this giant falling out that happened that split the studio. Now, the people who were making that game actually moved on and they're making their own games now. They haven't come out yet, but it'll be interesting to see when the people who left Naughty Dog make their own games, how those are going to turn out. But you may not be aware of this. One of the original writers of the real Last of Us 2 game, not the show, but the game, actually started posting up on social media after seeing the first episode, said, isn't it interesting that most, if not all of the major plot points in this show, I wrote? I wrote that. And my name is nowhere on this show. I didn't receive any compensation. I don't have my name in the credits, even as an honorable, you know, thanks for writing the original show. Nothing. Wasn't contacted. Absolutely nothing. All my work, Naughty Dog kept and turned into this show, and I get no credit. Okay? And they were upset. I believe why they were upset. That makes sense to me. If you're the creator of something, you get kicked out, right? Take a look at what just happened with the Dead Space remake. The original makers of Dead Space went off to make their own game, Callisto Protocol. They got crapped all over, but then their own game that they made back when they were part of EA gets re-released. It's almost identical, and that gets critically praised. What? But they made it. They're the ones who wrote that plot. They're the ones who laid that foundation for that game. Why does someone else get the credit? Okay? But you notice whose name is all over the credits of The Last of Us show? Neil Druckmann. Yup. The guy who was primarily writing Last of Us 2, and the guy who primarily is the guy who's a big issue of contention among gamers about what happened with Last of Us 2. Ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, here's what's going on with this television show. Neil Druckmann is looking to differentiate the show from the game so that he can take credit for it. Because if he had it exactly the same as the game, then people could argue, oh, it's the same thing, and how can you say that it's a unique show and it's good when you didn't do it? Well, he's thinking, if I make a bunch of nuanced changes to the plot that literally don't affect the overall arcing, you know, plot, but if I just make these changes to kind of make it my own and to twist it just a little bit and push it a little bit in the direction that I'm trying to go with my agendas and things for these games, now I've made it my own and I can take in all the praise because I wrote it. It's bullshit. All right? It's bullshit. The best parts about The Last of Us that are standing through in this show to me are the parts that were from the original game. The changes aren't any better than the original game. In fact, they're just kind of weird that they exist. If it was exactly, like I said, if Tess actually got a chance to get revenge on that guy who ripped her off and she murdered him, my God, now this stands as an example of the harshness of this post-apocalyptic world and how it is. There's no time to fuck around, right? But it's taken out. It's completely redone. Why? Because Druckmann wants to make it his own. And that actually angers me because I like the show, but I'm not in love with it. Honestly, I like The Last of Us 1 video game better so far. From what I've seen in episode 1, the hour and 20 minutes, I actually think the game does it better. And I think a lot of the changes are head scratchers and don't make sense. The acting's great. Production values are good. The music, I mean, it's the same soundtrack from the game, so of course that's good. But when you look at the changes, I think it's too much of Druckmann's fingerprint on it, trying to make it his own, and essentially say, oh, see, that's not the same as the game, so we don't have to worry about crediting those people who actually made the game back then, which is absolutely absurd. He's crazy and egotistical in this way, and it really upsets me that you now have a show that everyone's praising, but the things that are the best parts of the show, he never made, but because he changed enough, now it's his, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, that's my analysis after episode 1. I'd be very interesting to see what happens in future episodes. Like, will Ellie continue down this plot of being stupid instead of actually being smart and adult like in a survivalist like she was in the game? Will there be other significant major changes to the plots and the characters and everything that basically are Druckmann trying to put his fingerprint on it as opposed to something significant that makes it better as a television show? Because honestly, taking out the gameplay elements, this show's going to be fast-paced because you're not going to see them sneaking around for 2 hours avoiding, you know, infected or whatever. And if anything, I will say this, there were almost no infected in the episode, right? You actually see more infected in the first segment of the flashback of when it happens, the cordyceps, than the present-day apocalypse. Like, you almost see no infected, right, when it comes to that. I mean, maybe you see 1 or 2 notable things, but nothing special. And I wonder, again, will that change in the future episodes? I've only seen the first one. But this is my initial reactions. It's okay. It's not amazing. It's not terrible. I'm liking the strength of the actors, but I feel like, sadly, I see where it's going. He's trying to change it to become his show, when in reality, it's not his show. It's something that stands alone as one of the best video games of all time, and if you try to change little nuances to make it your own so you can take credit, that's pretty messed up, but that sounds like it's par for the course for Neil Druckmann. I guess we'll see what happens moving forward in this series. Anyway, I think the show is good, but I'm not going crazy for it like a lot of other people so far. Now, I am planning on watching the next few episodes of the next few nights, so if you like this video, please leave comments on it. Let me know, do you like this kind of style of video? Did you enjoy this feedback? Is this the kind of thing you'd like to see on DSP Reacts as I watch new shows and things? If so, I might continue to do this style of video on the channel, and I'm thinking next few nights I could watch more episodes, maybe do a video for the next 2 episodes and a video for the next 2 episodes, and then as the new episodes come out each week, maybe I could do 1 video a week like this to let you know what I thought about the new episode as well, all right? But I need your feedback. Maybe you hated this video, you're like, I don't want to see it anymore. Let me know too, all right? Share your thoughts. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon.